everyone. I am Claudia Taylor, Director of Regional Programming for the UNT Alumni Association, and welcome to our third episode of UNT Alumni Live. Woo! Today, we're taking an exclusive tour through UNT's famous Texas Fashion Collection with Director and UNT alumna Annette Becker. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience to get a sneak peek at some of the collection's 20,000 pieces of fashion history. And we are thrilled to have you with us as we open the doors on this incredible resource here at UNT. Before we get started, just a few reminders. If you're joining us on Zoom, please check out the chat section at the bottom of your screen. I'll be posting some useful links, and you can also use that to send me questions. Just send them directly to me. If you're watching on Facebook Live, please leave us a comment or question and be sure to share the video so others can join us. We'll also have a link to a survey in the Zoom chat and in the Facebook comments section. So please fill that out and you'll be entered to win a UNT prize pack. And of course, we're trying our best to master Zoom like everyone else in the world. So please forgive us if there are any technical hiccups. We'll try to fix those as fast as we can. Now, before I hand the program over to my colleague, Casey, let me tell you a little bit about our featured guest, Annette Becker. Annette grew up on a farm in rural Kansas, about as far from high fashion as you can get. But one fashion history class at the University of Kansas where she earned her bachelor's degree, and she was hooked. Since then, Annette worked at art and history museums across the country before coming to UNT to pursue an art history master's degree. In 2016, she became director of the Texas Fashion Collection, taking over from longtime faculty member Myra Walker. In her time as director, Annette has significantly expanded the collection's reach. Its pieces are now seen by around 4,000 people per year, from school children to high-level researchers and fashion directors. She also works with museums across the state to lend pieces for exhibits, including the Bullock Museum in Austin and the McNay Art Museum in San Antonio, just to name a couple. The collection's 20,000 pieces are housed right here on campus and include an impressive combination of haute couture and historical gems, including one of the largest collections of Givenchy in the world. Always eager to continue learning, Annette is now pursuing her PhD here at UNT. Today, we'll learn a little more about her journey while she shows us just a glimpse of the Texas Fashion Collection's incredible pieces. Casey, take it away.
Thank you, Claudia. I tried my best to look fashionable today, but it's really hard when you can't get your hair done. So I feel like it's a complete package, right? You've got to have everything to make it work, but we're making it work today. Annette, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited not only to talk to you about all of these fashion pieces. There's so much to learn. You've got so many interesting stories. But we have a lot in common because I too came from a very small town just west of here, and ended up at UNT as well. So I am curious to know, how did you make the decision to travel from the University of Kansas all the way to UNT? It sounds like you had some other options available to you. So why us? How did we get so lucky?
Yeah, I was really excited as I started doing research about places that I could go for a master's degree to find out that UNT was so supportive and had so many resources. When I started trying to figure out my next step after finishing an undergraduate degree and spending a few years holding a random assortment of jobs, I started looking at programs, and some of the ones that I looked into and got accepted to were NYU's Costume Studies program in New York and the Courtauld Institute in London. I was really looking for programs that had an art history focus, that had a faculty member I could really work with, and fashion collection so I could get hands-on experience. So I could go to London, New York, or Denton. Who would have guessed? And it really, once I started putting some feelers out here, this was really the best place for me. I was lucky that even now there's an art history faculty member named Denise Baxter, who's an incredible mentor for the students who work with her, and is right now she's my supervisor in my current job. So I'm really lucky even now to have her as such a supportive presence. But it was really incredible getting to work hands-on with the collection as a master's student. From my very first day in Denton, before I even had a bed in my apartment, I started volunteering here. And it's kind of amazing now, 6.5 years later, that I still get to spend most of my time here.
I couldn't agree more. And I can't help but notice the mannequins behind you and the colorful pieces that they're wearing. And we'll get to those in just a second. But I'm also a very competitive person. So I would like for you to tell us a little bit about where this Texas Fashion Collection ranks amongst the nation, the world. Is this pretty common for those people that aren't familiar with this?
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is something that's really special and that as a UNT community, we should be really proud of. So, as you mentioned, the Texas Fashion Collection has about 20,000 historic and designer garments and accessories. So, trying to imagine what 20,000 pieces looks like is already kind of incredible. I would say nationally, I think we easily rank in the top 10. And that's comparing us to places like the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Most people know about the Costume Institute and the big blockbuster exhibitions they have there. That's comparing us to places like the Phoenix Art Museum and the LA County Museum of Art. So I think especially since really our resources for day-to-day operations are more humble than those, institutions with multi-million dollar endowments. I think we can be really proud of what we have and what we're caring for here and what we're making accessible to researchers.
I totally agree. And I think everything that we do with humility and pride at the same time. So it's pretty remarkable. Um, this is really great. So do you mind if we take a look at some of the mannequins behind you and you can kind of tell us a little bit about what we're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to get to look at quite a few pieces in the collection. I'm going to try my very best to use my tripod and camera skills to their best effect, but we'll see what happens.
You got
um,
this. We believe in you.
yeah.
Hey,
so
while you're walking over there, one of the things that you had mentioned was this being accessible to students and being able to work with them. So don't let me forget to ask you more about that because I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So to flip my camera around, these are some pieces that right now we're working on digitizing. So in our collection, it's really important that we take care of the physical pieces that we have in our holdings, but it's also really important that people who can't physically come here and look at pieces also know what we have. We've been lucky that Gloria and Brezzy Westheimer has been really supportive of digitizing our collection. They provided some seed money to get a new database, which, to most people is the most boring thing in the world. But working inside a museum, if you don't know what you have and where all 20,000 pieces are, that creates kind of a problem.
For sure.
So we're lucky to have their support. And then more recently, the Diamond Eagles at UNT have supported us. So these are some examples of garments in our collection. And for example, with the Diamond Eagle support, we're going to be able to purchase some new mannequins so we can share even more pieces. And we're going to be able to hire some UNT photo students to help document these. So as you can see, some of these world-class designs are mounted on what now are tall, thin, and white mannequins. And I'm excited that we'll be adding some plus-size mannequins to our collection and some mannequins that aren't white. The pieces that you're seeing range from this fantastic suit, which is by Emmanuel Ungaro, who's a well-known French couturier. This is a piece that was recently donated by Nan Alexander, who lives in Dallas and has been involved in the fashion industry for decades. This is by Bob Mackie, who's well known for making most of Cher's clothing for stage. Also Tina Turner and RuPaul Charles, the famous drag queen. So we're lucky to have his work represented here. And then more recently, we've been able to acquire some pieces by perhaps lesser known designers, but people who are still really important. So for example, this yellow piece and the orange one behind it are by Josefa Ibarra, who's known as the Chanel of Mexico or the mother of modern Mexican fashion. These pieces we purchased for the collection, and they're the first ones by Mexican designers that we know of in our holdings. So it's really exciting that we have all of these different kinds of support for digitizing, that we have the Westheimers who helped with the database, the Diamond Eagles who are supporting us actually taking all of the photographs. And then we also have donors who have given us funds to add more pieces to the collection, to add some diversity. It's really fun to look at this with all the embroidery. We could all use a splash of color.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And I love that you're not only trying to diversify the mannequins, but also making sure that you have diversity represented in the different cultures and the garments there. So are there any, I guess, regions that we don't have represented yet that maybe somebody might have lying around in their closet thinking this might be a good addition to the collection?
Yeah, I think overwhelmingly what's in our collection, because it has been built on donations, has really represented a lot of high fashion, a lot of pieces by really well-known designers. So if you think about Coco Chanel or Christian Dior, when you think of high fashion, the names that come forward first, our collection has pretty robust representation by a lot of those people. But it's also really important for us to remember that high fashion worn by women does not, that's not an example of everything that anyone has ever worn. So right now we're working on adding pieces to our collection that have been worn by people who aren't women. So by men or by people whose gender identity doesn't, stick in that binary. Pieces that have been worn by teenagers or children, because there aren't a whole lot of 18-year-olds thinking about donating part of their wardrobe to our collection. And we're also really excited to add some cultural diversity to our collection. So I've been working really hard to add pieces by especially designers of color, and thinking about our community at UNT, that there is such diversity here, and we want to celebrate that and reflect that back on the people that come to visit us. So it's pretty exciting to think about, just adding more voices to what's already a beautiful choir here.
Absolutely. So we have our first question from our viewers. And once again, if you are just now joining us, whether it's in Zoom or Facebook Live, we are chatting with Annette Becker, who is the director of the Texas Fashion Collection in Denton, and is doing a remarkable job. And due to some really generous donors, she's been working on digitizing this collection through the Diamond Eagles program, but also the Brezzy Westheimer funding as well. So we're super grateful for all of those people that have contributed to keeping this alive and a viable thing. So thank you. If you have any questions or comments in your viewing, if you're in Zoom on the chat function, if you will send a question or comment directly to my colleague, Claudia Taylor, waving there, she will get those over to me to interject. And then also, if you're on Facebook Live, drop something in the comments section. Love to know where you're viewing from. Are you a UNT graduate? Are you viewing this because you're a fashion freak about fashion? What brought you here? We want to hear that from you guys. So let us know. But our first question says, we want to know, what's your personal favorite piece in the collection and why? Oh no, is she frozen? Did we lose her? Claudia, is she working for you? Technical difficulties. Please stay tuned. All right. Claudia, will you nod? Is she frozen for you? Okay. All right. Annette, if you can hear us and want to log out and then come back in, that might be a good option. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Diamond Eagles and what this program and group of sponsors and donors do for the University of North Texas. The Diamond Eagles program is an opportunity for donors to contribute a certain monetary donation to the university, and proposals are put in front of these donors to help make things better at UNT, for lack of a better term. And every year, those donors get to vote on exactly what it is they would like to see those monies go towards. So this year, the Texas Fashion Collection was the recipient of the Diamond Eagles donations. So that is where those monies are coming from. And as Annette was talking about, they are working on digitizing this collection, getting the collection online. And if you have time, check it out on the website. Claudia, if you can put the website for this out there. Yes. See, you're on it. You're amazing. It's really cool. I was digging through it the other day, and the pieces that are already up there, I was kind of drooling over them thinking, man, this is beautiful. I would love to have this in my size. And then I looked at the year, and it was all from the 80s. It really is cyclical, right? I mean, it's all coming back. So, Annette, glad to see your smiling face back. Thank you for hopping out and coming back in to join us.
Yeah, hopefully my Wi-Fi holds out.
Hey, I totally get it. And if not, I will tell you from personal experience, sometimes it's better to take it off the Wi-Fi and just roll with your cellular device reception if you get reception where you're at. So just throwing that out there. So you were going to show us your personal favorite piece in the collection and explain a little bit about it.
Oh man, that's such a good question. So maybe I should preface this by saying, could we go in our collection storage area and I'll show you why that's an incredibly complicated question to ask?
Can we? I would love to.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're
Oh, I
going.
see photo equipment back there. So,
Yes, yeah, our little photo setup there.
so that's where the students would get to do the photography for these pieces, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, we've been able to purchase professional quality lighting equipment, which you can see there, and then we also have this backdrop set up, and sometimes that rolls onto the floor, so we can shoot a mannequin from head to toe.
Sure.
So yeah, we have to be creative with some solutions, but we're lucky to have really professional quality equipment so that the images we're taking are publication ready, they're high res. Perhaps the last photographs we'll ever have to take of these, which is exciting.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. All
Okay,
right.
so I'm going to go into this dark room, which is where our collection is stored, turn on some lights, and then I'll flip the camera around.
All right.
So our collection storage area is about 13,000 square feet. 2 stories tall, packed floor to ceiling with garments and accessories. So as you can imagine, picking a favorite piece in here is nearly impossible. Honestly, I probably have a different favorite every day. My very favorite piece is a tiara made out of chicken wire, glitter, and glue from the 1930s by an unknown designer, and we have no clue when it entered the collection. But especially since, as Claudia mentioned, I grew up on a farm, and as Casey mentioned, it's kind of exciting to have something that relates a little bit to where I came from. One of my other favorite pieces in the collection, I'm going to turn around, is this crazy thing, which is hung upside down. This is a dress that was recently donated by 4510, which is a high-end fashion boutique in downtown Dallas. We have to store it upside down because the structure of this thing is made out of foam rods. So you can see these bars that go across, and I washed my hands, so it's okay for me to touch this. But you can see that these are really flexible in here. It's almost like a pool noodle is creating the structure for this. It's a really interesting piece that was maybe inspired by historic clothing. So the silhouette of it is pretty similar to this dress, which is from around 1865. So thinking about the time period where women were wearing corsets and crinolines, it's kind of exciting that this Japanese designer is maybe reacting to that. But the shape of this might also be inspired by a medieval Japanese castle. So thinking about the relationship between fashion and other forms of art. We've gotten to share this with quite a few students at UNT. So for example, we've had some sculpture graduate students who have come to the collection thinking about form and materials that have been really inspired by this. A lot of people think that high fashion is often something that makes you think, like, who would ever wear that? And most of our collection isn't that. So it's really exciting to have some of these avant-garde designs to kind of push the boundaries of what fashion design can be.
That is really fascinating. And that kind of brings us to another question that just came in. Someone is asking, do the students ever get to try on the clothing, or are they just handled like true museum pieces and taken very well care of?
That's a great and a really important question. So when something enters our collection, it will never be on a human body again. And part of that is just museum best practices for how things are handled. And it's mostly because we want to make sure that these pieces are preserved for people in the future to be able to study them and enjoy them. It is kind of sad in some ways that these pieces won't be on bodies, because you can imagine, an elaborate evening dress with a big full skirt, that there's something about someone walking in that or dancing in it that kind of brings it to life. But that's a compromise that we have to make, so that people in the future can still appreciate these. We need to make sure that they're not damaged by people wearing them. We do regularly have people call and ask if they can borrow things, if they can check them out to wear to parties. And I do not blame anyone for having that impulse, but it's definitely something we have to say no to.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So with this collection being stored the way it is, does the lighting affect these pieces in any way? Is there any natural light that hits these pieces? And talk to me a little bit about the storage of them.
Yeah, I wish I could have you all in here so you could feel how different this room is from most of the spaces that we spend our time in. So this room is always between 60 and 65 degrees.
Wow.
It's always at 50% relative humidity, and all of the lights are off when people aren't in here, which is 99% of the time. And even when the lights are on, I don't know if you can see this easily, lots of lights up there. They all have UV filters over them because it's really important to us that the textiles don't fade or become damaged. So yeah, it's, kind of a dark, lonely life for the things that are in here. And it's exciting when we can, get to bring them out for researchers or for the occasional exhibition that we do.
Absolutely. All right. So here's another question for you. Can you talk about how the students use the collection for their studies and research? And I know that's a pretty multifaceted question there, but
that's honest. It's honestly my favorite part of my job, getting to work with so many students and researchers. So the ways that people use the collection and engage with it are as varied as the people who come in here. And, as the director of the collection and the person who in theory gets to spend the most time researching it, it's incredibly inspiring to work with people who are coming at the collection with so many different perspectives. So for example, in any given week, I could work with library science students who are studying collection management, kind of thinking about all of the garments in here, almost like books in a library. That you have to have metadata and descriptions of them. You have to have a way of organizing them, a set of vocabularies so that if I'm looking for a dress, that we're calling it a dress and not an evening gown, or maybe we're thinking about other languages we might want to describe things with. I mentioned that we've worked with sculpture students with our collection, thinking about how materials are used in three-dimensional space. I'm lucky this semester to have gotten to work a little bit with a student in anthropology who's thinking about some of the broader cultural implications of what's going on in the collection. I've worked with a graduate student from another university who is interested in gender and sexuality, and she was able to look at some of our menswear collection and find signaling garments that would communicate to people in the know that they were part of like a gay subculture and wanted to use their clothing to help them be identified that way. There are a lot of examples of garments that we've actually procured for the collection that relate specifically to what students are learning on campus. I pulled one of them out. So maybe I'll come back in here and share it with you. So this is a piece that we recently acquired for the collection. It's by a designer named Prabal Gaurang. I'm probably butchering his name, but you try your best. So this is a dress from a 2012 collection he created. And what's really remarkable about it is that it uses digital printing on fabric. So if we get up close in this, you can see that it's almost photorealistic detail. We have a cow skull in the middle, which if any of you all are art historians might make you think of Georgia O'Keeffe, the really popular Southwestern painter. And then in the background of this, we have rare Japanese blue roses. For another art historical perspective, you might think about memento mori, which were started, I think, in the 17th century in the Netherlands, kind of as ways to remember that life is kind of fleeting. And they often used flowers and skulls to remind us that we all are going to die, which is kind of morbid, but there is beauty that we can appreciate now. This is a piece that, beyond its art historical importance, is really important for our fashion design students because the fashion design program has access to a digital printer. So that basically means that fabric can be printed in the same way that we might print off a photograph on a piece of paper. So as a point of comparison, you might think about maybe a garment like this. That has a pattern that repeats. So the same image goes over and over again. Or you might think about woven fabric like this Ungaro piece, where there's kind of a rigid grid that's made with all of the fibers going kind of at 90-degree angles from each other. So it's really exciting to use this technology to create textiles that look like something they've never been able to before, to really reproduce an image in photorealistic detail. So it's really fun for me to get to work with fashion design students and think about the questions they have about using these new technologies and find ways for our collection to kind of inspire the work that they're doing.
That's incredible. Now, We've got another question here. What would you say is the oldest piece in your collection?
Ooh, okay. So I've got a few answers for that. This is so much fun.
I'm telling you, this is great. Hunt. Yes. And I'm looking at the time and I'm going, it's already 4:30. I could do this for hours. Guys,
well, if you want to have me back.
Hey, now we're talking. If you're just now joining us, if you have any questions or comments, you can send those to Claudia Taylor if you're in the Zoom room, or if you're on Facebook Live, drop them in the comments section. Annette is touring us through the Texas Fashion Collection that is there in Denton, Texas. And she is about to show us, is it the oldest piece or one of the oldest pieces?
Yes. So I have grabbed the piece that is the oldest in our collection, and I'm going to find a flat surface to put it down on. Okay. So this is around 1,000 years old. It's a pre-Columbian textile fragment from Bolivia. So I'm going to flip this around. This is like a grand reveal.
Ooh.
So yeah, this has been around for about 1,000 years, which is kind of incredible.
Wow.
So pre-Columbian, if you think about before Europeans entered the Americas, all woven by hand, which is kind of incredible. Today, we don't think all that much about what color means. You know, if you go to a store, you can buy a yellow shirt or a red shirt, and it kind of all costs the same. But this was created before synthetic dyes were invented. So all of that red was probably created with cochineal, which are these teeny tiny bugs that grow on cacti that have to be hand picked off. Their bodies are about the size of the top of a pin, and you have to have tens of thousands of them to be able to create red dye this luminous and bright. So it's kind of exciting to have some of that natural dye history built in here. The other piece I want to share with you, we'll take a little walk in our collection. One of the oldest wearable garments that we have is a men's suit that was recently donated to us. So I'm going to zip on by. This is a piece that we just pulled out for a research appointment for a group of fashion history students at TC.
Oh, don't go away. Don't go away, Annette. Hang with us, guys. Oh, are you back?
Oh, I think so.
Yay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a men's court coat. This is all made out of silk velvet, so it's incredibly soft. Wow. And all of these floral motifs were hand embroidered on here. Again, this is before synthetic dyes were invented, so every single one of those colors had to be made out of natural materials. This is something that a man would have worn probably to go visit the king, perhaps at Versailles, because clothing like this would have been required. So today we think about clothing as really an expression of who we are as individuals. But in the 1700s, clothing really communicated your status so that people could understand who you were and how important you were. Because of that, and men being the ones who were in a lot of, really important social and political positions, their clothing was really, really luxurious. Wow. So today we think sometimes of women as being the peacocks of fashion, but remembering that men have been historically too is really important.
That is absolutely stunning. And the way the colors, the gradient, the shading, that's remarkable. And is there anything to talk about on the buttons, it looks like? Is there any symbolism or anything there?
Yeah, so all of the buttons have been hand stitched too out of the very same fabric, which is kind of incredible. All of them are non-functional, which is kind of a fun thing to think about, especially if we look at the front of this again. You'll notice that the lapels just kind of like barely touch each other, especially if there were a body in there. Right. Many pieces from this time period had some sort of symbolism with the floral motifs that are being depicted. For better or worse, there is no record of what those meant for this garment. So hopefully we can find some scholar to come do some work on this. So if any prospective UNT students are listening, we need someone with some embroidery expertise.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Okay, so let's see here. There's so much I want to talk about and get to. There's another question. I really like this question. And this person asks, do you ever recreate or replicate pieces to see how they would look on a human body and to help historical reenactors make patterns?
That is a fantastic
I love
question
it.
and something that's really, really important. So for some pieces in our collection, it's really important that we recreate the undergarments, which might sound kind of crazy. But for example, if we look at, let's see, I flip my video around. If we look at this dress, you'll notice that the skirt has a really particular kind of triangular shape. And if we look at this one, you'll notice that it's kind of narrow and flat in the front of the skirt. And then as we go around to the side, you can see there's almost like, it's called a bustle. So it kind of juts out at a pretty harsh angle. We do have undergarments that would have been worn under clothing at this time period, but because those are historical artifacts, we need to keep them safe too. So we regularly work with conservators who are able basically to recreate some of those historic undergarments. And then besides that, we've often worked with especially theater folks who work on costuming. So for example, a few summers ago, we had someone from, I think maybe it was Texas Tech, come here to do research for a play that was set in the 1890s. And she spent an entire week doing nothing but looking really closely at clothing that we have from that time period. I can show you some examples of that. She sat and basically made seam for seam copies of some of those pieces. So she made drawings or patterns for each of those garments. And then when she went back to her university, she worked with students in the costuming department to translate those patterns into garments that were the right size for the actors and actresses she was working with. So it was really exciting to be able to basically see garments from our collection on people's bodies and moving around. And that's a really great way to keep the pieces we have in our collection safe, but still kind of understand what they would be like if someone were wearing them.
That's amazing. So as you've been walking around showing these garments on the different mannequins that are in the warehouse there, they seem really small. What is that? Is the perception there correct? Are these mannequins really that small? And were these children dresses? What am I looking at here, Annette?
Yeah, that is a great question. Here, I'll see if I can turn the video around. And so you can kind of get a sense of this. So I'm standing next to the mannequin and I'm about 5'4". Okay. This is one of the taller ones that we have in here. So a good thing to think about with that is that not everything is saved. So historically, what's ended up in collections like this are the things that are kind of left over today. So part of that is that historically fabric has been really expensive. So year after year, people would unpick all of the stitches in a dress, put the fabric away, and then the next year take it out again and remake the entire dress in that year's style. And if any of you all have ever done a sewing project, you know, you can always cut something down. You cannot make it bigger. Right. So what ends up being saved is the final iteration of that design, the thing that's, you know, usually cut down and cut down and cut down. And also, I don't know about you, but especially this maroon piece, I don't know too many people who could actually fit in it. So we'll look at this one too. Again, for perspective, I'm about 5'4", and you know her head barely hits my shoulder. Right. So things that don't fit most people end up being saved too. Okay. Maybe some of you all have gone to vintage stores and tried on shoes, and you don't understand why all of them are super narrow and short. It's because other people have gotten the ones that fit most people. So, and I think historically there's been an idea that petite bodies are the most beautiful. And that's kind of a perception that's been reiterated in our collection. So I'm really excited now that we've recognized that we can address it. And we've been working on adding more pieces that are for plus size people.
That's fantastic. So earlier you mentioned your favorite piece being a tiara made of, what was it, chicken wire and glitter? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. It sounds like something my daughter would make for me out of love, completely out of love. Right. But I'm curious, are all accessories considered fashion? And what about hats? And can you tell us a little bit about your Balenciaga collection?
Oh, yes. So our collection, the way we've kind of defined it is things that people wear as part of the world of fashion on their bodies. So that means a lot of accessories are fair game. because our collection is really set up for storage first in the way our facility is set up, if you look at all of these boxes on this wall, and these are packed too deep. All of these are jam packed full of hats and handbags and shoes and hat pins and parasols.
Wow.
Several of them we have photographs of. So you can see we have kind of like a knit ski hat. We have one from the 19th century that has a feather on it. A little bit of everything in here. So really our collection is pretty expansive if we think about accessories. Something that I haven't mentioned yet is that part of our collection does include traditional cultural ensembles from around the world. So I'll pull out a drawer we have over here and give you all a peek into it. So these are from Thailand, and they're part of a temple dancer's costume, basically, or their dress. So we have ornaments for hair, cuffs that go around someone's upper arm, necklaces, jeweled belts, a headpiece. Our collection is really pretty expansive. Here, I'll open another drawer.
Wow.
Some of these pieces are relating to indigenous cultures in the US. So you can see that we have some beading. There's just a lot in here, some shoes and belts. Let's see. Oh, this is a really fun drawer. These headpieces are hung upside down, but you can see that they have beads that dangle on them. And you can imagine what it would be like for someone to wear that and move around, that it would make sounds, that the coins at the end of those bead strands would catch light and reflect it. So there are a lot of accessories for us to think about in our collection, accessories from around the world. And then to address your question about Balenciaga, he's a designer that is near and dear to our hearts at the TFC. I think we have around 370 pieces by him, and I think we might have one of the biggest collections in the world of his work. That's largely come to us just through two people who donated most of these garments. And it's really exciting for us to have him in our collection because he is considered arguably the most important fashion designer of the 20th century. So many people might have heard of Christian Dior, the famous couturier. Dior called Balenciaga the master of us all. So if Dior is humbled by Balenciaga, maybe we can be too.
For sure. Do you have anything available that we could view of his?
Yes, this is one of the most iconic pieces in our collection. So this is a short evening dress from around 1955. It would have fallen just below the knee. So for us to call that short might sound a little silly, but in its time period for an evening dress, it was pretty scandalous. A way to think about that now might be if you think about what people wear to proms or to really formal occasions, it's usually floor length. So something like this is kind of unexpected. This is a really beautiful demonstration of Balenciaga's skills. You can see that there's this pink silk taffeta that's kind of runched up and then tacked in place. So it has this sort of, tormented quality about it. It's kind of poetic and beautiful. You can really pay attention to the sculptural qualities of the fabric. And then we have, I think this is Valenciennes lace, layers and layers and layers of it. Something that I love being able to do in our collection, and this is probably going to make some of you at home laugh a little bit, but we can also look inside garments. So usually it doesn't make sense to do up the skirt looks for garments, but you can see that there are metal hoops in here right there. Yeah. So that's what's giving this garment structure. So it's really exciting for us to be able to not only, see the shape of this, see the silhouette, but then think about how the designer actually created that. Oftentimes designers do something like this, where it's just yards and yards and yards of tulle. So this is like a sea of puff, if you all can see that. So it's kind of interesting to see that from this Zac Posen dress, that's one way of approaching creating a full skirt. But then we have Balenciaga, who created that sort of cage crinoline, which actually relates to that dress from the 1860s that we looked at over there.
That's incredible. And I hope that everybody that is watching this did the exact same thing that I did when you put this phone up the skirt and went like this, And when you're looking in the drawers, I keep wanting to, I feel like I'm there. This is so remarkable and such a special treat. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we're running really short on time, and I want to ask, let's see here. Can you give me a number? How many designers are represented in the collection currently?
Oh,
Ballpark.
that's such a good question. I think it's around 2000, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'll have to go to our database and maybe I can make a comment on Facebook Live. I'll leave a comment later that has the exact number. But yeah, I think it's around 2000. I think that's also around the number of donors that we have to the collection. So we have these 20,000 pieces here, and I think it's hard to imagine how they all ended up in this space. And it's really been from individuals who have special things in their wardrobes and they want to make sure that they're saved and they're accessible to people. So it's kind of incredible thinking about the literally thousands of perspectives that are represented here.
That's amazing. So before we go, I would love to hear you tell everyone a little bit about the Wandering Wardrobe, because this is something that's super special. Like I personally am inspired by this and I love what's happening. So share it with the world, please.
Yes. So I think one of the things I'm proudest of since starting as the director of the Texas Fashion Collection is that we've tried to be really responsive to what people need. And one of the groups of people that we've realized has been really underserved by the TFC is K through 12 teachers. So from a UNT perspective, it's really important that we work with those people because they're the ones that are maybe going to encourage their students to come to UNT. And what is the future of a university except for its students? So in talking with some K through 12 teachers, specifically in the Denton ISD, we realized that it's really hard for them to bring students to our space because, wrangling buses is not easy and getting permission slips. So if they can't come to us, we should go to them, right?
Yes.
Except that most of the pieces in our collection, we've made a promise to donors to care for them in a specific way. So we've created a project called the Wandering Wardrobe, and I have an example of a piece that's going to be in that I'll share with you. So the Wandering Wardrobe is a set of artifacts that we've acquired specifically to work with K through 12 classrooms. This is a pair of shoes that we got that is going to be part of that collection.
I hope my daughter is not watching this. My daughter would flip over these. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, they're so much fun. So these are by Jeremy Scott, a pretty famous American fashion designer. Some of you all in the DFW area might remember the Jeremy Scott exhibition that was mounted at the Dallas Contemporary pretty recently. Let's see, I'm going to maybe figure out how to use my phone. Aha, there we go.
Yay.
The tripod was not cooperating. So Jeremy Scott is really known for doing things that are kind of kitschy and campy, things that are playful, that don't take themselves too seriously. And he draws inspiration from areas that, most fashion designers, if they're taking themselves seriously, wouldn't. So this is from a collaboration he did with Adidas. They have these poodle heads as the tongues of the sneakers. You'll notice that they have teeny tiny tails in the back, which are really fun.
That's precious.
And they have bones across the laces. So recognizing that these artifacts can be really exciting and inspiring for students and for K through 12 teachers is exciting for us. But we've also wanted to make sure that those people aren't just kind of left with something beautiful and interesting and they don't know what to do with it. So we've also been putting together lesson plans that teachers can use and related materials. These shoes are just one example of about 7 pieces that we have prepared already. And we're hoping to keep growing the collection as we get feedback from the people who use it.
That's incredible. So how many pieces do you have right now in the Wandering Wardrobe?
If I'm remembering correctly, we have 7. So some examples of other pieces are a 1920s flapper dress, another court coat from the 1780s that wasn't in quite as good condition as the green one that we looked at. So it was something we really couldn't add to our collection, but it's something that's kind of perfect as a teaching example. We're also adding a digitally printed silk scarf by the Native American designer Jamie Akuma. And we're also planning on adding a piece by Todd Oldham, who rooted part of his fashion design career in Dallas.
That's incredible. And I love, if you're an educator and you're listening to this, I know you're probably pretty jazzed, especially if you teach fashion design, to hear that they're working on a curriculum. So just one more way that UNT is giving back to the community on a much larger scale. And I love this concept. I love what you're doing here, Annette. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So
no!
I know. I know. So we may need to reschedule a follow-up because this has just been absolutely fascinating. And I know there are many other questions out there. So guys, if you have any other questions, drop them in the comment section, the chat section, and we'll get with Annette and we'll see what we need to do to answer these questions. Okay. But I, again, just want to say thank you so much. And of course, go Mean Green.
Go Mean Green.